Buenos dias. Welcome to this episode of EST. My name is Josh King. That's Sam.
And this Me llamo Samuel.
Samuel. This is an episode for established church leaders, primarily in English.
I'm just going to totally throw something out here. So we have a lot of Spanish. This has nothing to do with the episode. I just want to jump in. I've been doing this long enough. I guess I can do this on my own show, right?
Yeah, tell us.
So Tyndale puts out a lot of great resources, and I love the New Living Translation Bible. That's not a secret to anyone who's been listening to the show, whether Rain or on Leadership or EST. And I came across this new Bible. It's a bilingual Bible. It's the NLT in English and the NVT in Spanish, and it's a parallel bilingual Bible. So one side of the page is English, one side is Spanish, and I'm like, this is awesome. I showed my Spanish-speaking pastor, Jesus, and he's like, oh, this is great. I'm going to use this. So anyway, if you have Spanish speakers in your church, I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, that's a great resource.
They're not a sponsor. I just really thought that was a pretty cool Bible.
It'd be really cool if NLT did sponsor this. That'd be really sweet.
Well, maybe one day. Maybe one.
All right, so let's talk about our sponsor, our legitimate sponsor.
Yeah, we do have a legitimate sponsor. It is Church Teams, and we are grateful to all that they do for churches. Here's the deal, and it is a very good deal. They're offering 2 months free to our listeners. They don't do this for everyone, just you who tune in to EST. So go to est.church, check out the offer there. And I know, church management software can be a bit of a headache. I've experienced that headache before, but you get rid of your headache when you go to Church Teams because they've got great customer service. They've got basically every application that you can need when it comes to church management software, from texting to scheduling to giving to check-in. They do it all. So you get value without compromise, and you get world-class technology for every church size, every church budget. Pricing is simple. It's based on the number of people in the database, which makes it very easy to use and very easy to understand. They got plans starting at $37 a month. So go to est.church and check out that offer. Fill out the form and go talk to Boyd Pelly and his team. He's a good guy. He runs a good company. They want to serve you. Yeah,
church management software is something to be optimistic about. If you're getting it into your
that's like one of my segues, man. You can do better than that.
It was pretty bad, but we're going to talk about optimism because we like to keep it happy. We're happy people, and we found out that apparently churchgoers are also optimistic. What's the study? Tell us the study.
Yeah, okay. So there was a study that was done by the Public Religion the PRRI, which is really the acronym stuff, the Public Religion Research Institute. There we go. National study, did it in August of 2022. So recent, 6,000 adults all across the U.S. So this is a legit, scientifically valid study. And they had several findings. I'll put a link in the show notes to the entire study. But one of them stood out to me. 82%. Josh King, 82% of congregants have an optimistic perspective about their churches. Only 16% have a pessimistic outlook. There's a lot of negative, and I bring this up because there's so much negativity about the church, and that the church is going to die, and the church is not doing well, and the church is not doing what it should be doing. And there's these books called that use like death and autopsy and crisis in their title. And I think my dad wrote some of those.
I was about to say, I know somebody that wrote an autopsy one.
So it amazed me that like, wait a minute. When you talk to the average churchgoer,
they're not bad.
They actually have when it comes to the future of their church, they're optimistic about the future. What say you? I know you don't haven't dove deep into the study, but what say you about that particular finding?
Well, the first thing, I love the number 82. 1982 was the best year ever. You know why?
Was that the year you were born or the year Jackie was born?
It's not only the year I was born, but it's also the year Chewy's Mexican restaurant was established. You can't argue with that. Okay, but as far as the study's concerned, I would be curious as far as things go with denominations. I wonder if certain denominations that are just getting beat up in the media all the time, we're part of a network, not so much a denomination called the Southern
Convention,
Baptist.
Josh. It is the
A
Southern Baptist
convention.
Convention. We are not a denomination. No
We are
creed but the
not.
Bible.
Yeah, says everybody up until this year. So we get beat up quite a bit, and I could see people who are Southern Baptist. It's like when you talk to people who go to a Southern Baptist church, but they don't know it, like it's hidden in the name, and they never talk about it. They love their church a lot more than they're like. I've heard people go, "I would never go to a First Baptist church," and I'm like, your church is a First Baptist church. Y'all just
Your
have a
church
cool
actually
name.
used to be First Baptist before they changed
Y'all are
their
the First
name.
Baptist church. So I wonder a little bit about that. But I would say this: it actually doesn't surprise me. Here's something. You and I, and probably the majority of our listeners on this show, we spend all day in this stuff, and every day we're working through this. And so I think the average pastor may think that their church is struggling more than the church member may, because we see all this stuff, and our human nature, most of us tend to focus in on the fly in the ointment instead of seeing, like, you know what, generally speaking, this is still a pretty great thing. And it's exciting, it's fun. And I think most of the membership of a church, now we as pastors will preach a lot about, like, it's not just about you just show up one day a week and get entertained and leave, that kind of stuff. But the reality is, for a lot of churchgoers, that is what it is. And they come and they're like, I like this preacher just fine. This music's just fine. A couple buddies of mine come here, and so it's pretty good. I like it. So I think that it's not that surprising to realize that majority of them are optimistic. How did you take the study when you read it?
I took it a couple of ways. One, there's some breakdown of the numbers here. 45% are very optimistic, 37% are somewhat optimistic. So, when you break down the numbers, there's a little bit of like, hey, I'm still optimistic, but maybe not as optimistic. So there may be some of that going on. And then when I looked at the pessimistic side of things, 12% said they were somewhat pessimistic, 4% said they were very pessimistic, and then 2% didn't provide an answer. And I thought, man, my first reaction was, wow, that's really good. Over 8 out of 10 people have a positive view of their church. And there was a further part of the study that said 9 out of 10 churchgoers can affirm that they are proud to be associated with their church, and they're satisfied with the current leadership. So that's 90% that can affirm those two statements. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
That's pretty great.
I got to thinking, I'm like, man, this is really good. This is far better than if I were to set forth a hypothesis that I would then test. I would not have put forth such a high number. But then I thought, you know what? How many of us have had 5% of the church or 4% of the church be very pessimistic? And it's like this huge headache. It's like this awful thing that 1 out of 20, let's just round up a little bit here, 1 out of 20, 5% are just so negative. And it's like, if that's the case, then you can really feel that. So, my first reaction was, hey, this is far better than I would have hypothesized. My second reaction was, yeah, but there's still that percentage in the church, that vocal minority. And this is proof. This is proof that it really is the vocal minority, and that many times the silent majority doesn't speak up. They don't defend, because that, some of those are their friends or their grandma or whatever. So it's not like they're going to be outspoken against the pessimistic ones. But it was definitely more encouraging than anything else. Even though after I kind of thought about it, I was like, okay, this actually makes sense from just from an anecdotal perspective.
Yeah, I agree. If it weren't for just a few grumpy people, it's generally fine. Most of the people, and I think that this, like you said, it confirms what we always joke about on this show. It's pretty much like you and I are having coffee. We're sitting around Starbucks or wherever the coffee shop is we went to, and we're inviting the listener to come and sit down with us and just have a discussion. I think at most of those conversations where a couple pastors are getting together, somebody's going to be discouraged. And almost always we say, yeah, but that's just like that one dude, right? It's, generally people like you. I've been around your church. People talk about your preaching. I see what social media says. And this is confirming from a data standpoint that we weren't just saying that. We were actually meaning it. People do like you. Largely, and whether or not they like you is probably a different. They're just fine with it. There's probably a giant chunk of the church, my church included. Take it or leave it. Josh is fine for right now. If he goes, we'll get another one, or if he wasn't here, that'd be fine. There's a probably a large group, I think, let's say 20% that love me. And then there's a group, 10%. Man, if I needed to be thrown out the window, they would help open the window. They don't like me. And I think that that's just something that we all need to keep in mind as this data shows that is the reality. As much as one complainer or one person that's sowing discord or division really eats our lunch, we have to go back to things like this and say, it's really honestly just a few people. And now a few people can hold a lot of influence, an outsized influence or something like that. And like you said, there could be a lot of people that are not going to go against that person because they're family. And when push comes to shove, they're actually going to take that person's side. And so those are real valid concerns. I could hear some of our listeners saying, yeah, it is one person, but he has an immense outsized influence. True that. Now, on the other side of it, I think here's what I've learned a lot of times. That person that's just driving you crazy as a pastor, they're complaining at everything, they're causing all this kind of stuff, and everybody's just kind of sitting around. What I found out is that most people are just looking at that person going, that's just what he does. They don't care what he says one way or the other. And we think their silence means affirmation of that person's complaining, but that's not reality. They're sitting over there going, man, I wish he would be nicer, or I wish he would hush. He just always has something negative to say. So
it's kind of like, it's kind of like the crazy person on the subway. When you make eye contact, that activates them.
Yeah.
So, they know that if they speak up anymore, it may activate them even worse. So their silence is actually strategic. It's like, if we say something, he's just going to go off. So let's not say anything.
Just let him run his mouth. Yeah. And maybe that's not the best way to approach it. If you are listening, and let's say that you're you're in an established church because you're somehow listening to EST, and you are not a minister, you're not a pastor, you're a lay person, you can do a massive amount of ministry to help your pastor and your church by being the one that respectfully calls the curmudgeon off to the side and says, hey, cut it out. You are always negative. You may not even know that you sound negative, but you do. So until you can say nice things, don't say nothing. If you can be that person, and of course that takes a certain kind of personality. And
okay,
like
Mom.
If you can do that, yeah. If you could be that person, then be that person. Here's something else what I get from this study. Positivity. It's like, I don't know. I'm from Texas, right? And so there's all of this crude oil under the ground. You just got to tap into it. You got to get it over there. We need better policies so we could be
drill, baby, drill
it all. But if we could tap into that, the majority of your people sitting out there in the congregation, they're happy. Don't go in negative and feed that sort of fire. Feed the positivity. Say, you guys feel positive about this. I'm positive. Let's charge the mountain. You'll see a swell. It's like it's an untapped resource right there. Obviously, 90% of them. So tap into that resource. Hang around positive people. Preach, teach positively. I think that would help.
Yeah, I think there's a few other things going on here as well.
Okay.
One, people tend to be more positive about their local church and more negative about the church at large. So,
interesting. Yeah.
There are problems in the church. There are issues in the church. There's churches that are really struggling, but not mine. Right. So I think there's a little bit of that going on here where this question was a very personal question. It was about your church, not the church in general. So I think that's another thing to take away here that, which again is good for pastors, right? Because last time I checked, most pastors only pastor one church, not two or three. So, if your church has a positive perspective on itself, it may be a bit inflated and frankly, they may need a reality check, but at least they're coming at it from a good perspective instead of a negative perspective. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is, this survey was done in August of 2022. And by that time, I mean, we're talking about a year ago, the periphery of the church that was lost through the pandemic, everyone was at that point figuring out, well, they're not coming back. That was
Mm-hmm.
your core is left. So this survey is also a survey of the core of people. So these are the people that really bought in. And perhaps some of the curmudgeons went the way of the periphery, when the pandemic occurred last,
Mm-hmm.
really 3 years ago. So I think that's another thing that's happening is not only are people thinking positively about their specific church, even though they may have concerns about the church at large. I mean, they're surveying, these surveys are of the core of people who tend to be more positive anyway. So I do think once you kind of dig into some of the reasons that these results aren't quite as surprising. I know we put surprise optimism in the title of this episode,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how we get people to listen. It's called a hook. We got to have a
Yeah,
hook.
yeah. Let me wonder this out loud. Let me wonder. So, I think just listen to that study. I think that the majority of your church members would be more positive than the majority of pastors, church leaders. And we're a podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. I wonder if what you're saying there, it sort of rings like this. We tend to be much more identified, at least our personal identity and our attachment to our denominations or to our networks or to our conventions because of our seminaries, because that thing existed before and after. So you and I both were Southern Baptist participants before we were at the church we're at. And if God ever leads us to another church, we will probably still be Southern Baptist participants. So the Southern Baptist arch, where we went to seminary, all that kind of stuff. And I think this would probably ring true even more so of the Episcopalian model or, the Methodist, et cetera, in which they really are employed by their denomination. We tend to identify with that bigger thing. We're asking people, like this survey was asking people about the local thing. And I wonder if it might be more healthy for us to remind ourselves that the denomination or the network we're a part of is part of it, but that's not really our calling. Wasn't to a denomination. Our calling was to a local church. And so that's where we really need to invest more of our maybe our perspective or our optimism on like things aren't that bad here. And I think you're right. And we've already kind of broached the topic of Southern Baptists. I think a lot of people are like, man, it seems like there's a lot of crazy things going on out in the Southern Baptist world, but my church is not that way. My church
There have been
doesn't
crazy things
respond
going
to
on
this
in the
way.
Southern Baptist world since 1845.
It's how we started, and it's sadly how we are. And so
As one historian has stated, we are a contentious lot.
we certainly are. So I would just say maybe this study could help us talk to our close friends, encourage our pastor friends, talk to our spouses about, hey, help me stay more grounded, stay more local focused about this isn't that bad. And it's actually really great and got some great people here and that sort of stuff.
Excellent point. You can get sucked into a lot more negativity through the tribe, typically, than you can through your own local church.
Right.
And I I think my church is in a pretty good place because if you asked just a random person at my church about the convention, they would probably say, I know we're Baptist, but what kind again? Because Baptist is on the sign, but what kind again? What flavor? What flavor of
Yeah.
Baptist are we?
Right.
Only 30% of our church has a Baptist background. Only a portion of those are Southern Baptist, just given our location geographically. We're not exactly in a Southern Baptist stronghold here in Southwest Florida. So for us, my people definitely connect more just local church than they do tribe. And I think you've brought up a really good point because a lot of networks, denominations, tribes, conventions, whatever you want to call them, they're struggling. I've said many times on this show that there's no such thing as a non-denominational church. I will stand by that because there's so many of these networks that claim they're non-denom. In reality, they very much act like a denomination, even
Yeah.
more so sometimes than the actual denominations. They have more control over the churches.
Hmm.
Um, there's obviously a few truly independent churches, but they tend to be more rare. But the label non-denom is popular. Like people do tend to want to go to a quote unquote non-denom church, even if it's not technically non-denom. They just like that
Hmm.
label. And I think part of that is because of the negativity at the tribe level.
Yeah.
Whether it's Baptist or Methodist or name your particular tribe, the press has been more negative than positive. So it
Hmm.
is wild that even though the press tends to be more negative, that the people at ground level still think positively about their local church. I think that's a really good sign that we need to play into. Let's play into our strengths.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree. So I think that this is oddly therapeutic. It's a kind of thing that maybe pastor, minister, maybe you want to print this one out and stick it on the board in your office and remind yourself that likely the majority, they're happy and they don't expect anything else of you. That's just a few people. So live in that strength. Ultimately, of course, God is happy with you. Be happy with that. He loves you. You're good. You are called according to his purposes. So ultimately, that's there. But we all want a community that appreciates us and stuff like that. So this is what that says, and it is the truth. It is reality.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something here. Will I regret this later? Maybe. I'm gonna
Maybe.
say it. I'm gonna say it anyway. Because I'm just shooting from the hip. It's just in my brain, so it's gonna come out my mouth, which is the way radio works, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Shepherd the 82%.
Mm.
Don't shepherd the 18%.
Yeah,
Now,
leave them to the wolves. No, I'm kidding.
well,
That's not what you should do.
I mean, I understand the biblical principle, leaving the 99 for the one. I
Yeah,
totally get that.
you're about to
But
get emails. Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Hmm.
But the one is, that's the one that's lost and wayward. And, that
Hmm.
there's a little different thing here than, hey, we're just going to be antagonists in the church, right? So,
Yeah. Right.
here's my point. You can't shepherd the antagonists.
Hmm.
They're not going to let you.
Hmm.
So why would you expend energy trying to? Now, be
Yeah.
kind, be gracious, always be open to reconciliation. And maybe they don't even have, so much of an issue with you as the pastor, just overly negative. So, you don't ever want to neglect part of the congregation, but pour your energy into the people that believe in what's happening and they believe in the future. Again, this study was, I'm optimistic about the future of my church. So
Yeah.
I would say spend the bulk of your time. Maybe this is a better way of saying it. Spend the bulk of your time with the 82%.
Hmm.
And when warranted, strategically spend some of your time with the 18%. Because you obviously, as a pastor, don't want to neglect anyone in your congregation. So maybe I feel a little better about the way I said that.
No, I mean, I hear you. I call it plow around. We're not talking about lost people here. We're not talking about like ignore lost people, ignore those who have not yet received Christ as their Savior. We're not talking about that. We are talking about those who claim the name of Christ. Maybe they've been around for a while and they just see, they're the kind of person that's like, I vote no just because there should never be a unanimous vote. They're the kind of person that like, it's my duty to complain. Or they're the kind of person that feels like, I think it's a good thing to make sure that the pastor never feels too good about himself. We want to make sure that he's a little bit humble, that kind of thing.
I am the pastor's accountability.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that
These
that guy.
yeah, these people love the word accountability. They just are always and which what I call is plow around. Plow around. They're still there, but go where God is working, and God is working in the hearts of these people. The people who are open and receptive to the word, they will produce fruit. So you want that good soil, those good hearts, that sort of stuff. Plow around the stumps that just won't move. And what I find is a lot of those stumps, once you get off and you're all having fun together and they're back there being a party pooper, they'll come along. They're like, oh, okay, well, I guess, you just somehow have to tell them it was their idea, that kind of thing. So I think the sentiment, and I think our listeners are going to be gracious enough to hear what you're saying there, Sam, and say, don't spend all of your energy. Don't lose sleep over the people who are always negative all the time, anyways, or always have something to complain about, even when they complain in those passively nice ways. That drives me crazy.
Hey, Josh, you're really showing improvement as a preacher.
Yeah. There's so
Thanks.
many phrases I could say right now, but they probably will listen to the show, so I'm not going to say it. Yeah.
Well, here's what I'll say. I think it's
Mhm.
about time to sign off, and I think we need to thank our sponsor,
Let's do it.
Church Answers University, a fast-growing school that offers ministry training and education at a fraction. This is a fraction of the cost of a typical degree program. There are payment plans, and oh, by the way, books are included. You cannot beat this. There are currently 2 certification programs, a certification in Christian ministry and a certification in women's discipleship. And since I, helped create Church Answers University, I can go ahead and tell you this little secret. Worship is coming. So we will soon have a certification in worship, which we're really excited about. So the way you can find out about it is to go to churchanswers.university. We have things called ministry training centers, which are great for groups in the church. If you want to put a group through this, there's a pretty big discount associated with it. And as always, everyone in that group will get their own books. So go check us out at churchanswers.university.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening to this episode. We hope it was an encouragement to you. You are doing a great job. We love you. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.